Welcome to the McFeely Mess Podcast at Inforum.com. In-depth conversations and opinion covering a variety of topics from the world of news, sports, and more. Here's Mike McFeely.
Welcome to another episode of the McFeely Mess Podcast at Inforum.com. And this is actually our second go-around with former Forum editorial page editor Jack Zaleski, because Jack and I recorded one of these podcasts last week.
Actually did not record.
Well, we tried to record, and I thought that everything was on the up and up with my super-duper high-end technology, but nothing recorded. And so probably the best podcast in the history of podcasts has been lost into the ether because of my technological unsavviness. But we're back again this week in his office, and we're going to chat about stuff with Jack Zaleski. Hello, sir.
Hi, Michael. Nice to be with you. I think looks like you got all your wires all connected here, so we'll be all right.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what happened, but it doesn't matter.
The gods were against us.
Yeah, yes. Mm-hmm, yes. Last week, trying to do this, we talked a lot about local politics, about the city commission in Fargo, about the homeless issue in Fargo, and we'll touch on those again. We have a half hour or so that we can do this in. But I do want to start someplace, Jack, where you and I were chatting about before I hit the red record button. At least I think I did. Yeah, it did. Yeah, there's a light lit there. And that's about something that you and I have both noticed in different areas of the region, and that's that at very first glance, and whatever it means, I don't know, but there are fewer Trump signs in people's front yards and in front of businesses and things like that. And there are more Harrison Wall signs, yard signs we're talking, political yard signs, than I expected.
Oh, I think you're right on, Mike. I've been driving around Fargo mostly, and through some of the 7th District over in Minnesota on the way to the lakes and that sort of thing. And in Fargo in particular, in the neighborhoods I drive through, and did a little driving around yesterday specifically to look at signs. And the Harris, Waltz, Merrill Pepcorn for governor signs are out there in some of the precincts that we know of that are Republican precincts. But I don't see any, or very few anyway, Trump signs. I don't see all that many Armstrong signs, for that matter. So I don't know whether signs are an indication of anything, although they used to be. They used to be a pretty good indication of which way an election was going. But this is different because we are in most of this part of the world is Trump country, but it could be that people are not putting out Trump signs because they're either embarrassed to do so, or they're reluctant to do so because in their heart of hearts they know they're wrong. So
well, and I'm originally from Alexandria, Minnesota, and I still get out and drive around quite a bit out in Minnesota Lakes country, whether it's Alexandria, whether it's Becker County, which is Detroit Lakes, whether it's Pelican Rapids, which is Otter Tail County, whether it's Crow Wing County further over, which is the Brainerd area. I have a couple of sisters that live over in that area. Yep. And all of those areas of Minnesota that I just described are deeply, deeply red areas.
Yes,
I mean, they will vote for Donald Trump and have voted for him in the past. 65-35,
Sure.
To put out a general number. My wife and I were down around Alexandria last Friday and driving around the town itself. And there was actually a parade in town, the homecoming parade. And so we had to kind of take some side streets and kind of get shoved off our normal path.
Well, that's your town, isn't it? You went to high school there.
I did. That's where I'm from originally.
Yeah.
But as I was driving around the town itself of Alexandria, which is deeply, deeply Trump country, Mary Franzen country, Michelle Fischbach country.
Yes.
I saw way more Harris Walls yard signs than I did Trump Vance signs. When we got out of town and drove around one of the lake on which I grew up, actually, Lake Carlos, and drove just a little bit along the east side of that lake, I saw more Harris Wall signs in front of $1 million lake homes than I did Trump Vance signs. Now, part of that might be that those people maybe are from the Twin Cities and that their cabin, quote unquote, is, and so that's,
possible.
But whatever.
Possible.
But I was And again, I don't know what it indicates. It might indicate nothing because Alexandria and Douglas County are still going to vote very heavily for Donald Trump.
Yeah.
But it shocked me because in 2016 and a little bit lesser so in 2020, I mean, the Trump signs were everywhere in rural Minnesota.
Yes.
And I remember Colin Peterson in 2016. I saw him a few weeks before the election, and I go, "What do you think?" And he said, "We're in trouble." And I said, "Wow." I said, "Well, why?"
And he was right.
And he goes, "Because when I drive around the 7th District, all I see are Trump signs."
Yeah.
And he goes, "I have not seen one Hillary Clinton sign yet." And that's a bad sign.
I think that, even in Fargo, Fargo is not quite as red as the surrounding country, but it still is red. I think part of it, Mike, is what we've talked about before, both off the air and on the air, is an enthusiasm that Democrats have for the national ticket that they did not have before President Biden backed away. So I think that enthusiasm is translating into, let's go for it. And signs are part of that. And I think people who have honestly looked at Trump and honestly tried to be honest to themselves about who he really is, are probably not going to put signs in the yard. So I think it might be, part of it might be a reflection of the enthusiasm among Democrats for the ticket, and part of it might be a reluctance of Republicans to identify with Trump.
Yeah, and last thing on this is, and I said this to you before we went on the air here, is especially in Minnesota. I don't know so much about, I think Republicans are pretty well organized in Fargo and in North Dakota. But in Minnesota, Republicans are not well organized. The Minnesota GOP is a train wreck.
Yeah, it's a mess.
It's a disaster. They have no money. They have no organization.
Right.
And
they don't even know who their leaders are.
No, all the BS up from the Trump campaign about they're going to open this many offices in Minnesota. They never did that. It was all, as usual with Trump, it was all a bunch of bullshit.
Yeah.
And so that's where I'm sort of tempering my, maybe there just aren't signs available because Republicans in Minnesota are just such a disaster. So that, be as it may. Well,
that could be.
It's likely that Trump is going to win North Dakota by a massive, massive, massive margin. It's just as likely that Kamala Harris and Tim Walz are going to win Minnesota by 5 to 8 points.
Easily.
I mean, so we'll see how that turns out. But anyway, I wanted to bring that up because I just thought it was interesting that I think some of the Trump enthusiasm has waned in the last 8 years. I mean, people were so fired up about him in 2016 when he came to Fargo in 2018 to campaign for Kevin Kramer. It was just the arena, Shields Arena was just nuts. It was the peak of the Trump mania.
I think it's waned in the last 8 weeks, not the last 8 years. I think it's waned seriously in the last 8 weeks, and people are taking another look at this guy and his running mate, JD Very Weird Vance.
That was a good column he had, by the way, on the weirdness.
God, I'm telling you, and some of the things Trump's been saying, they're beyond strange. They're beyond reasonable thought. And I think people are saying maybe he's the soft-headed old man in the race these days. And he looks that way. Yep. And nothing he says is original. It's just he regurgitates the boilerplate again and again and again, says the same things over and over again. And as for J.D. Vance, the senator from Ohio, who has caused one of his towns in his state to be just inundated by crazies because of the Haitians eating household pets nonsense, and then he doubles down on it and he says, well, whether it's true or not, we got to do something so we catch the attention of the media. So that's kind of a left, an ass backwards way of saying, we're lying, but we want you to pay attention.
Well, and as long as we're going down that road, it doesn't surprise me that the Republicans have, gone down the immigrants are eating pets thing because that's been their whole playbook now for decades. The Republicans are trying to make people afraid of immigrants, and especially immigrants with darker skin than many of the residents. Be that as it may, one of the most abhorrent parts of what Vance is doing is that it's his own constituents.
That's right.
I mean, that's the part that...
He's a senator from Ohio.
He's a senator from Ohio, and he's dumping on a city in his own state
that has
many of whose voters voted for him.
And has a Republican mayor.
And has a Republican mayor.
And a Republican governor.
Yes.
Both of whom who condemned Vance and Trump for all this nonsense, which is just absurd.
Aside from just the craziness and the racism and the...
Yeah.
The fact that it's his own state. I mean, how can people in Ohio... I mean, I would be livid if I was a Minnesota resident and Amy Klobuchar said, you know what? Moorhead's really a dump, and we really need to stop giving money to Moorhead, and there are immigrants in Moorhead that are eating people's cats. I would go off my rocker if somebody... I get it if it's Kevin Kramer or Doug Burgum taking shots at Moorhead or Minnesota because it's the back and forth between Minnesota and North Dakota.
Yeah, it's an easy shot. It's an easy shot.
It's an easy thing for them to do. And when they go to their lake cabins in Minnesota, they seem to have no problem with the state. But I get that. I get what the dynamic is there.
Yes.
But it'd be like Kevin Kramer, dumping on whatever Bismarck because it has immigrants coming in there.
Yeah,
it's no different.
I know, and it could be they're just pulling out all the stops, and I would think that that town in Springfield, in Ohio, would be more than embarrassed by their senator because of their senator, and more than outraged because their senator and presidential candidate is saying things like this about the town. The Republican mayor and the Republican governor have condemned Trump and Vance.
Speaking of mayors and local politics, let's pivot here and try to kind of recover some of the ground that we did last week, allegedly, when we did this. But a couple of things that we talked about were the makeup of the Fargo City Commission, with the election in June of Michelle Turnberg, who is a Trumper and just from that Mensa wing of the Republican Party, or non-Mensa wing of the Republican Party. But now that she has a seat on the commission, along with Dave Pepcorn, who, we'll just stop there. The makeup of the Fargo City Commission, Jack, is different now. And I didn't think that it was going to be as much of a change in the city politics as there has been, because I thought Mahoney, Kolpak, and John Strand are still left-leaning to progressive people. But the election of Michelle Turnberg it's really changed the dynamic of what's being talked about at city commission meetings and maybe the future of different aspects of the city.
Yeah, I think there are two factors here that have made for the change you're describing. One, of course, is the election. The other is the serious budget problem. And the other is the needs of the city to serve the people that it's supposed to serve, whether it's public safety or roads or, whatever legitimate city functions have to be funded. And they're finding that the city has grown, the demands for city services have grown, and so the budget has taken some real stress. So Mahoney's change, I don't think is an ideological change. I think it's a financial change. I think he's really looking at the numbers and saying, we got to do something. I think in his heart of hearts, he doesn't like what they have to do. And what they are doing, by the way, is nibbling around the edges. The amount of money they think they're saving by cutting out this department of this diversity department, and by looking at other agencies that help people, is really pocket change when it comes down to it. It's not going to reduce anybody's property taxes in Fargo by what they're doing. They may be able to balance the budget, and that's fine. So that's a serious concern. The change in the ideology politics of the city commission give the Pepcorn crowd a little more clout. Turnberg, Michelle Turnberg, the celebrity candidate, as former Governor Ed Schaefer said a few weeks ago on the air, that she got elected because she's a celebrity, not because she's qualified. I'm adding that not because she's qualified, but the celebrity factor is real, and so I believe that what could happen down the line here, Mike, is that both Pepcorn and Turnberg have ambitions to be mayor. And if that happens, and if when Mahoney's done, which he has to be done because of the term limits thing, and they both decide that they're mayoral material, they are not, by the way, in my opinion, but if they do, you could have a head-to-head between two people who would be appealing to the same voters. And that would be interesting than a third candidate who's, more reasonable, smarter, more in tune with the needs of the city rather than their political ambitions would win. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens in the next couple of years. I think both are positioning themselves to run for mayor.
That's interesting because I had not heard. It's been clear for years that Pepcorn, Dave Pepcorn, wants to be mayor. I mean, he's wanted to run for many years.
Yes.
I didn't know that about Michelle Turnberg.
I don't know that about her. This is what I'm making an assumption here based on what I'm seeing.
Okay, all right, and which is fair. Yep. That's fine.
Yeah.
But if that happens, and God, I mean, she was just elected, 2 months ago or whatever. But whatever. If that happens and she decides to run for mayor, it is going to be a bloodbath between her and Dave Pepcorn.
Absolutely.
Because Dave Pepcorn is going to be mad.
Yes.
Big mad. Because he has clearly shown his ambitions to be mayor. And I think the last time around, when Shannon Roars ran for mayor, he was pissed off at her that she ran from the right side. And again, the city commission spots are nonpartisan allegedly, but everybody has their ideologies.
Oh, of course, and they don't hide it.
No, and that's fine. But he was big mad at Shannon Roars because he wanted to run, but he couldn't because she's also from the right side of the aisle.
Right.
And he ended up going after the Roars family, if you remember from that campaign.
I do.
Over the stuff up by the apartments or the stuff up by NDSU,
right?
The Newman Center, I think it was, wasn't it?
Yeah, the apartments right near the Newman Center.
Yeah. And so, I mean, Dave didn't hold back. It was he emptied both barrels at the Roars family right in the middle of the campaign.
He tends to be, when it comes to that kind of vindictiveness, Dave tends to be a little shallow.
Not going to get a disagreement here. You brought up the Department of Diversity, Equality, and Inclusiveness, which is
awful things. Diversity, equality, and inclusiveness.
Who would want those?
Who would want?
But what the Fargo City Commission did was it voted to eliminate that department, which was formed after the George Floyd riots in Minneapolis, and we had our own.
We had our own demonstrations. Demonstrations slash riot,
mini
vandalism.
riot in downtown Fargo.
A lot of vandalism.
Yep. After that.
Yeah.
You mentioned also other departments that help people. Could be something that would be next in the chopping block. I'm assuming you're talking about, perhaps among other things, the Downtown Engagement Center, which is meant to serve the homeless population of downtown Fargo.
Yes.
Do you believe, and this is a loaded question because I know what I believe, but I'll ask it anyway because that's what I do.
Yeah.
Do you believe that those are two areas that Fargo is wise to look at to cut? Because again, we need to make cuts. The city of Fargo needs to make cuts, needs to find savings, efficiencies, to use the euphemisms.
Yes.
They need to cut. Are those areas that it's wise at which to look?
Well, there's two angles there. Is it wise from a service to the community to cut those things, or is it wise politically to cut those things? Now, if you're just looking at it politically, and you've seen some of the, admittedly not scientific surveys, the majority of the voters in Fargo, or the majority of those surveyed in Fargo, have no trouble cutting those services. if you're looking at it on how to deal with a population that has to be served in some way, that's not going away, then it's a bad decision. If you're looking at a modern city like this one that has prided itself on being inclusive and welcoming and trying to reach out to help people who are legitimately in need, then it's a bad decision to cut these things. Now, that being said, how they were managed, how they were run, and whether they were successful or are successful is a question up for debate. I think the missions and the way the missions were executed were not done well. We're not articulated well, and we're not handled well, and didn't really solve much. That doesn't mean you scrap them. That means you modify them to do the job that you want them to do. What the city should have done, rather than cut them off at the knees, is before they even voted, put together a plan to take those functions, fold them into agencies that could do them without the financial burden on the budget, and that could have been done. That's a matter of efficiencies and job descriptions, rather than just slash it. That was politically, I think it was, for some people on the commission, they could say, "Yay, look what we did," to those people who wouldn't vote for us anyway. But in terms of service that a city is obligated to provide to people, I think in the long run it makes Fargo look mean.
The DEI department, and I think you and I are in agreement on this, that I don't know that they were able to demonstrate accomplishments.
They didn't.
I mean, I think that most reasonable people have no problem with trying to level the playing field,
right.
or actually, some people do have a problem with that, but most reasonable people don't. I don't know what that department did in terms of real outcomes.
I think that was the problem, Mike. Its purpose, its mission seemed to be sort of clear, but the execution of that mission and being able to point to any kind of progress, it just wasn't there. If anything, we saw situations in the city regarding homelessness and the camps along the river get worse. So
that's the engagement center. The DEI department was a separate thing from that.
It's all folded in to trying to help people. It's all trying to get people into the system, to get them help. With agencies. The cuts, in fact, probably won't make a difference. They won't make a difference in the overall budget. They'll balance the budget, but if people think cuts like this are going to reduce their property taxes, then they're spitting into the wind. But the symbolism of taking away a city's or attenuating a city's responsibility to serve all its citizens, whether we like them or not, is a bad image for this city.
The homeless situation is one that I think differ some on. There are more homeless people in downtown Fargo now than I've noticed before, and I'm downtown 6 days a week.
Yep.
For the most part.
Sure.
The Forum Building is downtown. I'm in a lot of Saturdays, either just for fun or to come to work or whatever.
The building is a couple of blocks from the river,
Yep.
a couple of blocks from the center of town, a couple of blocks from the engagement center, this a couple of blocks from the civic center where homeless people are sleeping in the doorways. Yeah, we're right in the middle.
Yep, right, which is fine. But the problem that I've had with what Fargo has tried to do, and frankly, what this newspaper, the Forum, has editorialized about, if I can be so bold, and I think I can, if I'm fair, is that it seems like there are those who want that it's an aesthetic problem more than it is a human problem. That I want to be downtown to enjoy a martini at the Jasper, and I don't want to look at these homeless people because it bothers me. And so let's move them out to somebody else's neighborhood, and that way downtown Fargo will be more thriving, and it'll be what we want it to be. And to me, that's it's wrong-headed, first of all, and it's not solving any issue.
Right.
You're just pushing it onto somebody else, and then it becomes somebody else's problem. But apparently there are those in the city of Fargo who they think that's okay. Dave Pepcorn just wants to put them all, to go back to the Old West, to throw them on the next train out of town and say, get the hell out of here. We just don't want you here. And that's not solving anything.
No. And he needs to check with the railroad before he goes ahead with that plan. So,
yes, he does, because it's not 1885 anymore.
He needs to think it through, which is a big call.
It's a big lift.
Big lift.
But I mean, do you see where I'm coming from, though? That it's
yes.
And again, you and I agree that there's no doubt that I could walk out to my pickup right now, out in the parking lot across the street from where we're sitting, and I could see a half dozen transients or homeless people in varying stages of
whatever.
I mean,
I know what you're talking about. I get here early in the morning, and often park in the lot, sometime on the street, and in the alley between the Forum building and the telephone, the AT&T building. There are often people in there who are, who are not, sweeping the alley, who have probably been there all night, and I'm not a big guy, but I'm not intimidated. Often, but sometimes, when there's more than one or more than two, and there seems to be some interest among them in me parking my car and walking to the Forum building, I get a little concerned about that. And my argument is, and I think it's a reasonable one, I should not have to deal with that. I should not have to be subjected to that. Sometimes when I'm downtown, go downtown for lunch or just to take a walk downtown, and am accosted by what are euphemistically called panhandlers. They're aggressive in a disconcerting way. Again, I don't want to get in a fight with anybody. I don't want to get in a confrontation with anybody, but I don't want someone, when I say thanks but no thanks, continuing to harass me to get a buck or two. So there's that argument that the citizens of this city who want to use downtown or want to go to their places of work without being intimidated by street people should be able to do so. And I don't have a solution here right away. Pepcorn's solution of shipping them out is ridiculous because there's people that are shipping them out from other places and shipping them into Fargo. So winter, of course, will change a lot of this, as it always does, because being on the street in the winter is a lot tougher than being on the street in the warm weather. So it'll change a lot. But nevertheless, that doesn't make the problem go away. That just delays a solution. And I don't have a solution to this because, as some of our reporting has shown, even if housing were available, and there is housing becoming available slowly, but even if housing were available, there's a percentage of these folks who are living on the street or were living in the encampment near the river who do not want to be bothered and do not want to live in housing. They want to live out where they live, and period, end of story. We've interviewed several of them. The forum reporters have interviewed, and those folks have said just that. I want to be able to sit in this doorway in the Civic Center, and I don't want to be bothered by anybody. And I want to be able to live where I want to live along the river. I don't need a house. I don't need an apartment. So there's that segment of it. You can't simplify this thing because it's a complex thing. The people that are part of the population that we're dealing with or trying to deal with are not monolithic. They're different. They've got different perceptions about how they want to live. And I think, what Fargo's trying to do is find some sort of a balance between the perceptions of safety downtown and the needs of this underserved population, some of whom don't want to be served. I don't know what the solution is, Mike. I'm not that smart. I'd have to ask Dave Pepcorn for the solution. So.
In the short term, if and this is not going big picture, how do we solve the world's problems and save humanity? I'm talking about how can we make downtown feel more comfortable for people who want to come downtown and have a pizza or a drink or a sandwich or just sit with their families in Broadway Square and just enjoy a nice evening. That problem has to be simpler to solve. Well, it is simpler to solve. There's got to be some solution to that short term.
I think, again, this comes back to how the city uses its resources, its public safety resources. And I am convinced, and maybe this is old school and old-fashioned from living in an industrial city that had some problems years ago, is that a friendly, on-the-ground, walking police presence is very useful. And I know that modern police departments like to have them in the cars, don't like to have them walking around, don't like, they've got all kinds of modern policing methods that apparently are effective for what they do, but downtown is unique. It's not like any other part of the city.
It's a small area, relatively small area.
With a lot of people.
Right. And buildings, and so it's a different feel.
Buildings and alleys,
yes.
And all that sort of thing. The police department, which doesn't live downtown anymore, the police department is down on First, the corner of First and 25th down there. I really believe that a police presence, I'm not talking about a militaristic police presence. I'm talking about a cop on the beat, maybe a couple of cops on the beat, and all they do during the times when there are people downtown, and when there are crowds gathering on the sidewalks, like when the bars close, to have a police presence, not sitting in a car in a corner somewhere, but walking around, getting to know the neighborhood, getting to know the merchants. Now, they do some of that. They need to do more of that, and I think just that change in atmosphere by having there's a comfort zone. That
I was going to say it would make the people, the patrons downtown, feel more comfortable.
Absolutely.
If you see a cop walking around,
the business about the old saw, where's a cop when you need him? Right there on the corner. He's right there. She's right there. There's the cop when you need him. And so I think that's important. And again, the police department has a resource problem. They need more officers. They need more personnel. They need more trained up people. The chief has said that again and again and again. And I think I think he's right. The city's grown. I mean, you look at the city from Harwood to Horace, from far north Fargo to far south Fargo, down now where the new recreation center is down there, and further south than that. The city's grown, and the police force has not grown with it. But again, downtown is unique. It's not a squad car kind of place. It's a pedestrian kind of place, and I think the police need to personalize it in that way. And I think it'll it might help. It's worth a try. You remember, Mike, just a few years ago, the police department and other agencies of local government said, well, we're going to put cameras everywhere. We're going to put these cameras here.
Yes.
Well, I remember writing about that because I had the Big Brother thing bothered the hell out of me.
Yep.
I didn't know who was watching the cameras, where this film was going to go, and they assured. And the whole idea was this: if we put these cameras up all over the place, which they did, that it was going to prevent.
It was going to be a deterrent.
It was going to be a deterrent to the kind of activity we're seeing. It hasn't worked. Well, maybe there's fewer robberies downtown. I don't know. But it hasn't been a deterrent to the kind of activity that the people of the city are concerned about.
Yeah, no, I think that's fair. And I don't know I'm sure that the modern police departments have their studies and their analytics and all that stuff, and so they don't want to have a cop out walking around anymore.
They've got to tailor their service. They've got to tailor their protect and serve mission to the neighborhood. And this neighborhood, this downtown neighborhood, is unique compared to any other part of the city.
It is, which, by the way, pisses off people from the other parts of the city who don't use downtown because they think it gets too much attention and too many resources go.
All they got to do is
downtown.
All they got to do is come downtown, and they could use it too.
Yeah. Okay. Got to wrap it up.
Sure.
Last thing. Being the left-leaning fellow that I am extremely nervous about November 5th. Just every poll I look at, there's no major separation between the two major party candidates, Kamala Harris and Donald Trump. And that's also goes to down ballot races, whether it's U.S. Senate or the U.S. House. You know, in Minnesota, the state legislature, the House of Representatives is up for grabs. I'm extremely nervous about the top of the ticket going for the guy that was in office from 2016 to 2020 and encouraged and failed to stop an insurrection at the U.S. Capitol on January 6, 2021. Do you share my concern? I shouldn't ask you if you share my concerns. Am I right to be concerned?
Well, I think we're all right to be concerned. However, some of my friends who are in your camp are almost panicked. They seem to be giving the felon-in-chief a lot more creds than he deserves. I think he's done himself a lot of damage in the last few weeks. I think people and the polls are close. But before this, they weren't close. He was ahead. And so they're close. And in some places, his opponent is ahead. There have been several of these presidential election analysts have come out with a prediction, and several of them have never been wrong except for the Gore-Bush race, which was settled in Florida.
Which they might not have been wrong on, by the way, but that's a whole different topic.
Right. And most of them, in fact, all of them that I know of, are predicting a significant win, not a close win, a significant win for Harris. Now, I don't know if that's going to go because, and the other thing is the polls, the Trump people have sort of made it almost an item of faith to lie to the pollsters.
True.
And so you really can't sometimes depend on the polls. And we've seen that in the past. So, concern, yes, but compared to what it was 6-8 weeks ago, that concern need not be as acute as it was then. I mean, when you look at the turn of events for Democrats in 6 weeks, it's astonishing, and it's a net gain that's unprecedented in presidential elections. Trump knows that. His people know that. He's running away from a debate like the coward he is, and because she shredded him at that first debate, and she would shred him again because he takes the bait, and she knows how to put the bait out there. She's smarter than he is, and she doesn't get rattled. He does. So I can see why he's running away, and he actually is making all sorts of playground excuses on why he doesn't want to play. And so that's not a surprise because, as I said in the column, a week or so ago, bullies are cowards, and he's a bully.
Thank you, sir. I feel better now. Jack Zaleski, thanks. Let's do this again soon.
Anytime, Michael. You just call.
You bet. Jack Zaleski, former editorial page editor of The Forum, here on the McFeely Mess Podcast. Thanks for listening. We'll talk again soon.
Thanks for listening to the McFeely Mess Podcast at inforum.com. For more podcasts and columns, head to inforum.com and search Mike McFeely